The silent chains how childhood trauma creates a lifetime of people-pleasing. There's a haunting quality to the way some wounds form, not with dramatic crashes or obvious scars, but in the quiet spaces between words, in the careful choreography of a child learning that love comes with conditions. Picture this. A 7-year-old girl sits at the dinner table, excitement bubbling over as she shares something that happened at school. Mid-sentence, her father's face hardens. The temperature in the room drops. Her mother's smile vanishes, replaced by that familiar look of disappointment that cuts deeper than any raised voice ever could. The child's words die in her throat. She doesn't understand what she did wrong, only that she's somehow broken an invisible rule. In that moment, neural pathways are being carved. Her developing brain is learning a fundamental equation. Speaking up equals rejection. Enthusiasm equals punishment. Being herself equals losing love. This is where the story begins for millions of people, not with a single traumatic event, but with thousands of micro moments that teach a developing mind that survival depends on becoming someone else. The architecture of approval, what we call people-pleasing, isn't actually about pleasing people at all. It's about surviving in a world that once felt emotionally unpredictable and unsafe. When you're small and completely dependent on the adults around you, their moods become your weather system. You learn to read the barometric pressure of every sigh, every frown, every moment of silence that stretches too long. Sarah Chen, a trauma specialist who has worked with people pleasers for over 2 decades, explains it this way. The child's brain doesn't have the luxury of thinking more parent is having a bad day. Instead, it thinks I caused this, and I must fix it. This becomes the blueprint for every relationship that follows. The human nervous system is designed to prioritize safety above all else. When a child perceives that love is conditional, tied to good behavior, quietness, or compliance, their survival instincts kick in. They don't choose to become people pleasers. They adapt to an environment where emotional safety depends on reading others' needs and meeting them perfectly. Consider Maria, now 34, who still remembers the exact moment she learned to disappear. She was 8, excitedly showing her mother a drawing she'd made at school. Her mother, stressed from a difficult day at work, snapped, "Nah, Maria, can't you see I'm busy?" The drawing crumpled in Maria's small hands. But more than that, something inside her learned to crumple too. From that day forward, she approached her mother differently, quieter, more careful, always checking the emotional temperature before daring to exist fully. The invisible curriculum of childhood children are phenomenal students of survival. They don't need explicit lessons to learn that their authentic selves might be too much, too loud, too needy. They absorb these lessons through osmosis, through the thousand small ways they're taught that love is earned rather than given freely. The curriculum looks different in every family, but the core lessons remain strikingly similar. Lesson 1. Your emotions are inconvenient. This might come through parents who shut down when faced with their child's big feelings, who respond to tears with irritation rather than comfort, or who consistently redirect the conversation away from the child's emotional experience. Lesson 2. Conflict is dangerous. Children learn this when parents use silent treatments as punishment, when raised voices lead to days of cold shoulders, or when expressing disagreement results in withdrawal of affection. Lesson 3. Your needs are burdensome. This lesson is taught through sighs when a child asks for help, through comparisons to easier children, or through the consistent message that asking for anything is selfish. Lesson 4. Love is performance-based. Perhaps the most damaging lesson of all, that affection, attention, and approval must be earned through good behavior, achievement, or perfect compliance. These lessons don't require abusive parents or obviously traumatic events. They can be taught by well-meaning adults who are simply overwhelmed, emotionally unavailable, or repeating patterns from their own childhoods. The impact, however, is profound and lasting. The neuroscience of need. Modern neuroscience has revealed something remarkable about the developing brain. It's constantly making predictions about safety based on past experiences. When a child's brain repeatedly encounters the message that authentic expression leads to rejection or conflict, it begins to automate suppression as a survival strategy. The limbic system, which processes emotions and threat detection, becomes hypervigilant to signs of disapproval. Meanwhile, the prefrontal cortex learns to override authentic impulses in favor of calculated responses designed to maintain connection. Over time, this creates what researchers call invisible trauma, wounds that shape behavior without leaving obvious scars. Dr. Michael Rodriguez, a leading researcher in attachment trauma, describes the phenomenon. The child's developing nervous system learns to associate authenticity with danger. Even decades later, the adult body will respond to setting a boundary or expressing a need as if it's life-threatening, because in their early experience, it was. This explains why people-pleasers often experience physical symptoms when trying to assert themselves: racing hearts, sweaty palms, overwhelming guilt, or a sense of impending doom. Their nervous system is responding to current situations with the intensity appropriate to childhood survival threats. The shape-shifting self. As children adapt to their emotional environments, they begin to lose touch with their authentic selves. The process is so gradual, so necessary for survival, that most don't even realize it's happening. They become skilled at reading rooms, at shifting their personality to match what others need, at making themselves smaller to avoid taking up inconvenient space. James, now 42, describes his childhood this way: "I became a different person in every room I entered. With my father I was quiet and studious. That's what he respected. With my mother I was the emotional caretaker, always checking if she was okay. At school I was the class clown because making people laugh felt like the safest way to exist. I got so good at being what others needed that I completely lost track of who I actually was." This adaptive shapeshifting serves a crucial purpose in childhood, but it creates a profound problem in adulthood. How can others love you authentically when you've become skilled at showing them only what they want to see? The adult inheritance. The strategies that serve survival in childhood become prisons in adulthood. The hypervigilance that once protected a vulnerable child from emotional storms now manifests as anxiety, as the constant mental scanning for signs of disapproval or rejection. The compliance that once earned conditional love now creates relationships built on performance rather than genuine connection. Adult people-pleasers find themselves caught in exhausting cycles. They give endlessly, hoping to earn the love they learned was conditional. But the more they give from a place of fear rather than choice, the more depleted and resentful they become. They attract people who are comfortable receiving without reciprocating, who mistake their overgiving for generosity rather than recognizing it as a trauma response. The cruel irony is that in trying so hard to avoid rejection, people-pleasers often create the very thing they fear. Their relationships become hollow because they're not actually present in them, only carefully curated versions of themselves designed to avoid conflict or disappointment. The hidden costs. The price of chronic people-pleasing extends far beyond simple exhaustion. It creates what psychologists call relational poverty, being surrounded by people but feeling fundamentally unseen and unloved. When your relationships are built on what you do rather than who you are, you begin to question whether anyone would stay if they knew the real you. Lisa, a 38-year-old teacher, describes the loneliness this way: "I have so many friends, but I feel completely alone. Everyone sees me as this incredibly giving, understanding person, but I've never given them the chance to love me when I'm struggling, when I'm messy, when I need something. I'm terrified that if I stop being perfect, everyone will disappear." This fear becomes self-perpetuating. The more you hide your authentic needs and feelings, the more evidence you gather that people only like your performed version. The more you perform, the further you drift from your true self, until the gap between who you are and who you present becomes so wide that genuine connection feels impossible. The physical toll chronic people-pleasing doesn't just impact relationships, it takes a devastating toll on physical health. The constant stress of monitoring others' emotions, suppressing your own needs, and maintaining perfect performance creates what researchers call allostatic load, the cumulative wear and tear on the body from chronic stress. People-pleasers are significantly more likely to experience autoimmune disorders, chronic fatigue, digestive issues, and anxiety-related conditions. Their bodies are essentially in a constant state of low-level emergency, always prepared to manage someone else's emotional state while neglecting their own basic needs. Dr. Jennifer Martinez, who specializes in trauma-informed medicine, explains when someone's nervous system has been conditioned to prioritize others' comfort over their own safety signals, they often ignore their body's basic needs. They'll skip meals to help someone else, lose sleep worrying about others' problems, or push through illness to avoid disappointing anyone. Over time, this creates significant health consequences. The relationship patterns people-pleasers tend to attract specific types of relationships that reinforce their original trauma. They often find themselves drawn to emotionally unavailable partners who recreate the dynamic of having to earn love through perfect behavior. They become the reliable friends who everyone calls in crisis, but who never receive the same support in return. They excel in professional environments where their value is tied to their output rather than their inherent worth. These patterns aren't conscious choices. They're the result of nervous systems that feel most familiar in dynamics that mirror their original conditioning. A person who learned that love requires constant vigilance and effort will unconsciously seek relationships that confirm this belief, even as they consciously long for something different. The tragedy is that when genuine unconditional love is offered, it often feels foreign and uncomfortable. The people-pleaser's nervous system, trained to expect conditions and requirements, may actually push away the very thing they claim to want most. Breaking the generational cycle, perhaps most importantly, understanding the origins of people-pleasing, can help prevent its transmission to the next generation. When adults recognize their own patterns and begin healing, they can offer their children what they never received: unconditional love, emotional safety, and permission to exist authentically. This doesn't require perfect parenting. It requires conscious parenting. It means noticing when your child's emotions feel inconvenient and choosing to welcome them anyway. It means modeling healthy boundaries instead of endless self-sacrifice. It means teaching children that they are inherently valuable, not because of what they do or how they behave, but simply because they exist. The path to healing recovery from chronic people-pleasing isn't about becoming selfish or uncaring. It's about learning to extend the same compassion you give others to yourself. It's about recognizing that the strategies that once kept you safe in childhood are now keeping you trapped in adulthood. The journey begins with grief. Grieving the childhood where love felt conditional, the relationships built on performance, the parts of yourself you bury to avoid conflict. This grief isn't self-pity. It's recognition of a real loss that deserves acknowledgement. Healing involves slowly teaching your nervous system that authenticity is safe, that boundaries don't destroy relationships, they define them. It means practicing saying no in small, low-stakes situations and surviving the discomfort that follows. It means learning to tolerate other people's disappointment without rushing to fix it. Most importantly, it means developing a relationship with yourself based on truth rather than performance. This requires learning to identify your own needs, feelings, and preferences, skills that were never developed because survival required constant attention to others' internal states. The ripple effect of recovery. When someone heals from people-pleasing, the impact extends far beyond their individual life. They begin to model healthy relationships for their children, showing them that love doesn't require self-erasure. They create space in their friendships and partnerships for mutual authenticity, teaching others by example that real connection requires honest communication. They also often inspire others to examine their own patterns of self-abandonment. There's something profoundly moving about watching someone choose themselves for the first time, about seeing them claim space they were taught they didn't deserve. The courage to be disliked. Perhaps the most radical act for a recovering people-pleaser is learning to be disliked. This doesn't mean being cruel or inconsiderate. It means accepting that not everyone will approve of your choices, your boundaries, or your authentic self, and that this is not only okay but necessary. The fear of disapproval that drives people-pleasing is at its core a fear of abandonment. But the bitter irony is that in trying to avoid abandonment through perfect behavior, people-pleasers abandon themselves. They trade their authentic presence for the illusion of security, never realizing that the security they seek can only come from within. Reclaiming your story doesn't have to end with the patterns that began in childhood. The neural pathways carved by early experiences are not permanent highways. They're more like paths through a forest that can be grown over and replaced with new routes to safety and connection. Every time you choose honesty over harmony, authenticity over approval, you're not just changing your own life, you're changing the story for everyone who comes after you. You're proving that love doesn't require perfect behavior, that relationships can survive conflict, that you are worthy of connection simply because you exist. The child who learned to earn love through compliance deserves to experience what it feels like to be loved for their truth. The adult you've become has the power to give that child, and yourself, what was always needed: unconditional acceptance, fierce protection of your authentic self, and the revolutionary understanding that your worth was never up for debate. In a world that profits from your self-doubt, that benefits when you make yourself smaller, claiming your full authentic presence is an act of rebellion. It's a declaration that you refuse to participate in your own erasure any longer. The journey from people-pleasing to authentic living isn't easy, but it's sacred. It's the process of coming home to yourself, of discovering that the person you were before you learned to perform is still there, waiting patiently beneath years of conditioning to be welcomed back into the light. Your healing matters. Your authenticity matters. Your presence, the real, unedited, imperfect version of you, matters more than you were ever taught to believe. The world doesn't need another person who has learned to disappear. It needs you in all your complicated, boundaried, honest glory. It needs your truth, your limits, your refusal to carry what isn't yours. This is your invitation to stop performing and start existing. To stop earning love and start receiving it. To stop betraying yourself and start coming home. The child within you who first learned to please is ready to learn something new, that they were always enough exactly as they were, and that love, real love, was never something they needed to earn.